Jimmy Kimmel thought he had the upper hand that night, but Sylvester Stallone delivered a line so sharp, so unexpected, that it's been all anyone can talk about ever since. It was just another Wednesday evening at the El Capitan Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. The audience was packed, the lights were warm, and the laughter track operator was already preparing their button. Kimmel's crew moved like a well-oiled machine. Last-minute makeup touch-ups, teleprompter cues, and producers whispering instructions. Nothing about the night screamed, historic moment in the making. Stallone arrived right on time, looking every bit the Hollywood veteran. Dressed in a navy blue sport coat and a black shirt, he exuded relaxation, maybe even a slight amusement. The man had been on talk shows for decades, since before half the crew was even born. Tonight, he was simply there to plug the second season of Tulsa King, share a funny story from the set, and let his PR team handle the rest. No curveballs, no surprises. But things had been brewing. A week earlier, Stallone had raised eyebrows with a casual remark in an interview with the Palm Beach Post. When asked about leadership and character in Hollywood, he casually called Donald Trump a wrecking ball. Sure, sometimes you need one to clear away the junk. The internet did what it does. Some cheered, some tore into him, but Stallone didn't apologize or backpedal. He let the comment hang in the air, knowing full well that in today's climate someone would inevitably bring it up again on live TV. And of course, that someone was Jimmy Kimmel. Known for his sharp wit, Kimmel is usually cautious with his guests, but he's never been shy about taking jabs, especially when politics are involved. His writers probably saw Stallone's comment as a golden opportunity to roast the action star turned political pundit. After all, Kimmel had taken aim at Trump and supported his celebrity guests before. Why stop now? Backstage, Stallone sipped water and joked with the hair and makeup crew. He was calm, collected, and had done this dance 100 times before. But if you looked closely, there was something different tonight. His smile didn't quite reach. His eyes. He wasn't nervous, he was prepared. There's a difference. The show began like any other. Kimmel delivered his usual monologue, poking fun at tech billionaires, making a quip about a recent Hollywood divorce. Then, it was time to introduce his guest. Ladies and gentlemen, Kimmel began, my next guest is the man who made boxing. Gloves fashionable, who took on Russia in the Cold War, and who apparently thinks Donald Trump is the second coming of Abraham Lincoln. Please welcome Sylvester Stallone. Some in the audience laughed, others winced. Stallone walked on stage, smiling and waving to the crowd. He shook Kimmel's hand and took his seat, ready to roll with whatever came next. Kimmel didn't waste any time. Before Stallone could even settle in, Kimmel leaned forward with a sly grin. So, sly Trump, huh? I guess Rocky took one too many hits to the head. Laughter and applause followed. But Stallone's reaction wasn't what Kimmel expected. He didn't look angry or offended, just quiet. The camera caught a flicker in his eyes, something between, really, and, okay, kid, let's see what you've got. He tilted his head slightly, his smile never faltering. Yeah, maybe, Stallone said, pausing just long enough to steal the momentum from the room. But at least I didn't get slapped on Oscar night and do nothing. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was charged. And then came the eruption of laughter. But what caught everyone off guard wasn't just the line, it was the way Stallone delivered it. The crowd's reaction was different this time, not just a routine chuckle but a wave of genuine laughter that felt alive. Stallone had just flipped the script on live TV and everyone knew it. For the first time that night, Kimmel's smirk faltered. He leaned back in his chair, blinking in surprise. Okay, he said with a forced chuckle. We're going there, tonight. Stallone didn't rush in to follow up. He let the moment hang in the air, commanding the silence in a way only a veteran like him could. He didn't need to raise his voice or seek reassurance. He leaned forward slightly, his gravelly voice steady and deliberate. You know, Jimmy, he said, I've taken and delivered punches on screen for more years than I can count. I'm used to people coming at me. I'm also used to getting back up. His tone wasn't defensive, it was calm, measured, and pointed. But these days, everyone's swinging and nobody's standing for anything. The audience murmured. Wasn't loud, but it was there, a noticeable shift. Kimmel tried to jump in. "Well, hey, I was just messing around." "I know you were," Stallone interrupted, nodding. "But maybe that's the problem. Everything's a joke. Say something real, and people get nervous. Crack-wise, and suddenly you're safe again." The audience was still buzzing from Stallone's response, and Kimmel, now visibly thrown off, could only nod and move the conversation along. But everyone knew the dynamic had shifted. Stallone had won this round, and the world had just witnessed a masterclass in how to handle live TV. It wasn't anger in Stallone's response. It was calm, focused. He wasn't roasting Kimmel anymore. He was reaching beyond him, speaking directly to the people watching. He glanced at the crowd, his gaze steady. "Look, I get it," he began. "I said something. People reacted. Fine. I'm not trying to preach. I'm not a politician." He paused, letting the words settle. "But I've spent 50 years creating characters who believe in something. Loyalty, courage, persistence. They weren't perfect. Neither am I. But I made damn sure they meant something." The applause bubbled up again, louder this time. Not just from the studio audience, but from the crew standing off stage. Cameramen, grips, even the stage manager were clapping. Kimmel, scrambling to regain control, quickly pivoted. "Okay, well, I don't want to turn this into a TED Talk." Stallone turned to him with a half-smile that cut sharper than any insult. "Nah, Jimmy," he replied. "TED Talks are for people who rehearse their truth. I'm just saying mine." The room laughed again, but this time, it wasn't because of a punchline. It was because it was real. It didn't feel scripted. Stallone wasn't performing anymore. He was simply speaking, and people were listening. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Kimmel wasn't steering the interview anymore. He was holding on, trying to guide things back to safer territory. "Let's talk about Tulsa King," Kimmel said, eager to change the subject. "The show's got you doing some wild stunts for a guy your age." Stallone raised an eyebrow. "You mean for a guy who's 77 and still more flexible than your writers?" Laughter rang out again, a shot landed. Clean, clever, and lethal. Kimmel chuckled. "I walked right into that." "You did," Stallone replied, pointing a finger at him. "But don't worry. It happens to a lot of people." It was that rhythm, quick jabs, light but direct. Stallone was doing what he'd done in boxing rings and on screen his whole life. Only now, he was doing it with words, calm, collected, and dangerous in the best way. He leaned back in his seat, took a sip of water, and adjusted himself slightly. "You can make jokes about Rocky all you want," he said, "but Rocky didn't quit. That's why people still care." The audience applauded again, louder than before. This wasn't just the studio cue light. This was honest, unfiltered approval. But Stallone wasn't done. Not even close. The audience was leaning in now, entertained, but also attentive. It wasn't just another celebrity interview. Stallone had turned that talk show couch into something more like a fireside bench, and every word he spoke felt like it carried weight. Kimmel, to his credit, had calmed down. He wasn't smiling as much now, but he wasn't pushing back either. A shift had occurred. There was a quiet respect settling over the room. "You know what I think is funny?" Stallone said, pausing slightly as he rolled his shoulders, "is how everyone's always looking for something to believe in, but nobody wants to say it out loud first. Everybody's waiting for someone else to go first." Kimmel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "So, you think it's your job to go first?" Stallone shrugged. "Not my job, just my habit." He looked down for a moment, collecting his thoughts before continuing. "I didn't grow up with much. I didn't have money. I didn't have clout. But I had a voice. Took me a long time to figure out how to use it." He glanced at the crowd before continuing. "I wrote Rocky on a coffee table in a one-bedroom apartment with a dog I could barely afford to feed." There was no pity in his voice, just a quiet recollection. "That script got rejected dozens of times. Studios offered me money to sell it, but they didn't want me. They wanted someone prettier, someone smoother. I said no, because if I'm going to put my name on something, I need to believe in it, even if no one else does." The room had gone completely still, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Even Kimmel was listening now. Stallone smiled slightly, then glanced at the crowd again. I've watched this industry chew people up for less, good actors, good people who didn't play the game, who didn't say the right thing at the right time. It's all timing now. Who you follow, who you unfollow, who you tweet, who you retweet. He turned back to Kimmel. So yeah, I said something about Trump. It wasn't a strategy, it wasn't a stunt, it was a comment. One man's opinion. People freaked out. But if people freak out over words, that says more about them than it does about me. The applause started again. No cues, no prompting. It just happened. Kimmel cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of the interview's original flow. You've always had a kind of grit to you, Kimmel said. You think that's what helped you survive Hollywood? Stallone nodded. Grit in, the ability to ignore people who act like they know better. Stallone had that down. He'd survived this town by knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. And when he did speak, he meant it. He paused for a moment, letting his words settle before leaning forward again. The truth is, Jimmy, he said, his voice steady, I'm not trying to be right. I'm just trying to be real. That's what people connect to. That's what lasts. Another pause. He let the stillness linger, knowing it would make the words resonate even further. You don't have to agree with everything I say, Stallone continued, his tone softer now. But you know, I mean it. And that, in this business, is rare. Kimmel nodded, a small, thoughtful gesture. He wasn't playing the clever host anymore. He was just a guy sitting across from Stallone, realizing that this conversation had turned into something bigger than both of them. A young woman in the front row clapped first and others followed suit quickly. Stallone smiled, gave a small wave, and then leaned back into his chair, relaxed. Let's talk about the new season of Tulsa King, Kimmel said carefully, easing back into the original flow of the interview. But even as they shifted topics, it was clear the real moment had already happened. Kimmel, however, tried to steer the conversation again, perhaps hoping to regain control. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He was back in host mode now, smoothing the energy and trying to keep the show moving. So, Sly, Kimmel asked, you ever think about running for office? I mean, the way you're talking, you've got half the country ready to vote for you already. It was meant as a joke, a soft jab to lighten the mood. But it cracked the door open just enough. Stallone tilted his head slightly, as if weighing how much of himself to give. He let a few beats pass before responding. Only if I get to debate you first, he said deadpan. The audience exploded with laughter, and even Kimmel laughed for real this time. He leaned back in his chair and clapped once. Okay, fair enough. Kimmel chuckled. But Stallone wasn't just tossing off lines for the sake of it. He saw something in that moment and his expression softened just a little. People always say I'd make a good politician, he said. I don't know. I think I'd rather play one in a movie. That way I don't have to lie. The crowd responded, with a mix of laughs and a few claps, but Stallone wasn't fishing for applause. He was just speaking his truth. Kimmel leaned in, genuinely curious now. Do you ever worry it could hurt your career? You know, saying stuff like that? Stallone met his gaze squarely. Jimmy, I'm 77 years old. You think I'm worried about career points now? I've done the work. I've told my stories. If I lose a deal because someone doesn't like how I vote, then maybe that deal wasn't worth it to begin with. The crowd stirred again, but this time, it wasn't provocation. It was raw honesty. And that was what hit hardest. You reach a point in life, Stallone continued, where you realize all the awards, all the red carpets, they don't mean anything if you're afraid to speak. Fear of being wrong, fear of being alone. It keeps people quiet, and quiet people don't change anything. Kimmel nodded slowly, as if processing the weight of what Stallone had just said. So what's the lesson? Stallone smiled. Don't be afraid to piss people off. Kimmel raised an eyebrow, waiting for more. Don't be afraid to be yourself, Stallone said, leaning in just a little. Pissing people off is just a side effect. Laughter filled the room again, but this time it was accompanied by clapping that felt different, a recognition of something more than just a joke. And on social media, the clips were already blowing up. Stallone's one-liners, the Oscar slap joke, the debate you first moment. It was all over TikTok, YouTube, X, and Facebook. The reactions were pouring in. Sly said what we're all thinking. Finally, someone in Hollywood with a backbone. Meanwhile, in the green room, the producers were glued to their phones watching the likes and shares climb at an insane rate. One assistant whispered to another, "We've never had this kind of real-time reaction, ever." Back on set, Stallone noticed the applause dying down. He took one final swing. "You know," he said, leaning forward, "there's a reason Rocky never ran for office. He fought in the ring, fought for people, but he never wanted power. He just wanted to matter. That's the difference." The studio fell into a rare kind of quiet. Not silence, but stillness. People were processing it. Kimmel gave a small nod. Not the kind of nod a host gives, but a human one. "You're a different kind of guest," Kimmel said. Stallone smirked. "Yeah, I come with a message and a left hook." But the real story wasn't about the roast. It was about respect. By the time Stallone left the studio that night, he had left an impression that would last long after the show ended. The internet treated the interview like a cultural event. Clips from the show spread like wildfire. Everywhere you looked, there was a new angle. The Oscar slapline even spawned its own meme format. By sunrise, the debate you first moment had become a trending soundbite on TikTok, and Twitter, or X as it's now called, was a battleground of quotes, arguments, and praise. People weren't just reacting, they were feeling something. Whether they agreed with Stallone or not, they couldn't deny one thing. He had handled himself with clarity, calm, and above all, purpose. There was no yelling, no forced laughter, no desperate attempt to be liked, just a man who meant what he said and said it well. Entertainment media went wild. Variety ran the headline, "Stallone silences Kimmel with brutal, brilliant comeback." Deadline called it the most genuine moment on late night in years. Even outlets that usually avoided anything political couldn't resist covering it. But this wasn't about politics. It was about presence. That's what people kept saying online. Not "Stallone owned Kimmel" or "Sly went off." It was deeper than that. It was about how he handled it. In Nashville, a local radio host opened his show with a breakdown of the interview. In Bakersfield, a small-town barbershop played the clip on repeat for anyone walking in. At a community center in Mesa, Arizona, two retired veterans were overheard saying, "He still fights for what matters, just in a different ring now." Of course, there were critics. A few pundits took jabs, and some late-night competitors made side remarks accusing Stallone of bringing politics where it didn't belong. But those voices were drowned out. Not because people agreed with everything Stallone said, but because they respected the way he handled the moment. There was no apology tour, no PR backpedaling. Stallone's team didn't issue statements or corrections. He went silent, letting the moment speak for itself. And in that silence, the audience filled in the blanks. He wasn't trying to be edgy. He wasn't making a stand. He just said something real, then moved on. That's what stuck. That's what people couldn't stop talking about. In the days following, talk show hosts debated whether Kimmel had lost control of his own show. Industry insiders whispered about Stallone's team fielding interview requests from platforms that normally wouldn't have reached out. People wanted more of that. Back in Los Angeles, at a small Italian restaurant off Fairfax, Stallone had dinner with two old friends, guys who'd known him since before Rocky. The waitress told them people had been stopping by all day asking, "Is he the guy who made Kimmel shut up?" Stallone just laughed. "I didn't shut him up," he said. "I just reminded him I wasn't here to play his game." The moment had passed, but the ripple effect remained. A talent manager in Scottsdale told a young client, "You want to know what makes a star? Watch Stallone on Kimmel. That's it, not the muscles, not the credits, the control." And maybe that was the part that struck people the most, the control. In a time when it seems like everyone is screaming, performing, trying to one-up each other with outrage, Stallone came in with no script, no agenda, just a calm voice and a steel spine. He didn't beg for applause. He earned it. But there was more to this moment than just a comeback. It struck a nerve. People kept replaying the clip not just for the laughs, but to feel something again. That mix of confidence, clarity, and composure hit a nerve in a way that even Stallone himself probably didn't fully expect. It wasn't about Trump. It wasn't even about Kimmel. It was about someone finally saying what others had been tiptoeing around, without anger, without fear. In a studio culture obsessed with viral outrage, Stallone's mic drop didn't come with shouting or finger-pointing. It came with poise. That's what made it land. He said it like he's been through things, one Reddit user wrote. Not like someone trying to be relevant, but like someone who already knows who he is. And that was it. The difference wasn't in what Stallone said, it was in how he carried it. In the stillness of his delivery, in the confidence of a man who doesn't measure himself against applause meters or Twitter trends. He'd seen too much for that. At a gas station just outside Amarillo, a middle-aged trucker named Dean stood by a pump, watching the clip on his phone. He shook his head and muttered, "That's how you talk when you ain't scared of losing anything." In Fresno, a retired teacher told her book club, "I don't care about politics, but Stallone? That was character. We need more of that." And that's the word people kept using. Character. Not celebrity. Not charisma. Character. It's a word that's been losing traction in a world obsessed with the loudest voices and viral moments. But Stallone's moment reminded everyone what it looked like when someone stood firm in who they were. No agenda. Just authenticity. In today's entertainment world where things can feel outdated and rigid, Stallone managed to breathe new life into it with one moment. He didn't try to be inspirational, nor did he give a motivational speech. But when he simply said, "I'm not trying to be right, I'm just trying to be real," it struck a chord. In a time when outrage is scripted and influencers dress up integrity, a statement like that felt like a punch to the chest, not in an aggressive way, but with a solid bedrock-like force. While some outlets tried to spin it, the public wasn't fooled. They had seen the clip, felt it, and knew it was real. Authenticity like that can't be faked. The real takeaway wasn't about politics. It was about posture. It was about how you stand firm when your values are tested, how you maintain your composure when it's easier to cave or go with the flow. A high school debate coach in Flagstaff even showed the clip in her classroom, not for the politics, but as a lesson in poise under pressure. She told her students, "This is how you handle disagreement without losing your voice or your head." That kind of composure is rare, especially today, but Stallone reminded us it still matters. Afterwards, Stallone stayed silent. No social media posts, no interviews. He let the noise fade away on its own, knowing it would eventually burn out. Meanwhile, his words kept circulating, and people kept asking, "Why did this hit so hard?" The answer is simple. Stallone entered a space where the script was already written and flipped it without raising his voice. He reminded people what authenticity looks like when it's not trying to sell anything, when it's not wrapped in ego or arrogance. He stood his ground quietly but firmly, showing that powerful statements don't need to be loud. They just need to stand without flinching. When the lights dimmed and the clip stopped trending, what stuck with people wasn't just a viral moment. It was the feeling it left behind. Stallone didn't walk out of that studio a different person. He walked out exactly the same as he was when he walked in. What changed was how we saw him. We didn't see the movie star or the icon. We saw the man. There's a reason this resonated so deeply. So much of today's public discourse on TV, online, and even in real life feels filtered, calculated, and safe. People are protecting their image, their brand, their reputation. Stallone didn't care about any of that. He wasn't trying to impress anyone or score points. He simply said what he believed, and that's rare today. People noticed that rarity, even those who disagreed with him. They could still appreciate that he was honest. What we're starved for in today's world is honesty without the theatrics, strength without ego, and opinions without shouting. Maybe that's why so many people shared the clip, not because Stallone won a battle on live TV, but because for 5 minutes, someone showed what grown-up confidence looks like. He didn't Insult Jimmy Kimmel. He didn't storm off. He didn't play the victim or apologize to keep his name clean. He stayed steady, made his point, cracked a smile, and moved on. No drama, no damage control, just character. People noticed this shift in the conversation. After the clip aired, it wasn't about politics anymore, it was about how Stallone responded. In a world where reactions define reputations, his response was measured, grounded, and respectful. In a gym in El Paso, a gym owner played the clip between classes. One of the younger guys asked, "Why is everyone talking about this?" The owner replied, "Because that's how men used to talk." He wasn't glorifying the past but pointing out something that's been missing, a quiet strength in standing your ground without stepping on someone else. That's exactly what Stallone did, and it's what made the moment bigger than just a TV appearance. The takeaway wasn't to speak your mind no matter what. It was deeper. It was, when you speak, know what you stand for, and when you stand, do it without apology but also without hate. That kind of presence sticks with people long after the clip ends. Kimmel moved on. The show continued. The news cycle churned. But that moment stayed with viewers. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. In a world full of noise, real still matters. So maybe the message wasn't political at all. Maybe it was simply human. Maybe Stallone's quiet mic drop was a reminder that strength doesn't need to shout, that dignity doesn't bend, that confidence isn't about being right, it's about being sure. And that's something everyone from any background or belief system can learn from. If this story hit you in a meaningful way, if it reminded you how important it is to speak honestly and stand with grace, don't just move on. Share it. Talk about it and hold on to that feeling. Because when the cameras stop rolling and the applause fades, the only thing we truly leave behind is our character. Subscribe for more stories that make you think, stories that remind us who we are and who we can be.